Hello again. Mr. Stink, Chapter 19, Supertramp. I am not apologizing to him. You have to. Mr. Stink sat at the head of the kitchen table, reading all about himself in the newspapers, as Chloe stood at the stove, frying some sausages for him. Her parents were arguing again in the next room. It wasn't a conversation that their houseguest was meant to hear, but they were so angry, their voices were becoming louder and louder. But he does smell. I know he smells, but you didn't need to say it on the television. Chloe smiled over at Mr. Stink. He looked so engrossed in all the headlines. Supertramp. Stinky superstar steals show. Homeless man saves boring election. But he appeared not to be listening. Or maybe he'd put his rabbit-dropping earplugs back in. Obviously not, shouted Mother. Last night I had another call from the Prime Minister telling me I have embarrassed the party and he wants me to withdraw as a candidate. Good. What do you mean, good? This whole thing has turned you into a monster, shouted Dad. What? I am not a monster. Yes, you are. Monster, monster, monster. How dare you? Screamed Mother. Go and apologize to him. No, apologize. For a moment, all you could hear was the sizzle of sausage fat and lard in the frying pan. Then slowly the door opened and Mother oozed like slime into the room. Her bouffant was still not what it was. She hesitated for a moment. Her husband appeared in the doorway and gave her a stern look. She did a little theatrical cough. Mr. Stink, she ventured. Yes, Mrs. Crumb, replied Mr. Stink without looking up, still engrossed in the papers. I would like to say sorry. What on earth for? He inquired. For what I said about you on Question Time last night. About you smelling of all those things. It was impolite. Thank you so much, Mrs. Call me Janet. Thank you so much, Mrs. Janet. It was rather hurtful, and I do pride myself on my personal hygiene. Indeed, I had a bath just before I went on the show. Well, you didn't really have a bath, did you? You had a pond. Yes, I suppose you're right. I did have a pond. And if you so wish, I will have another pond next year, so I remain perfectly clean. But you're not clean, began Mother. Be nice, interrupted Dad forcibly. You don't know this, said Mother to Mr. Stink, but after what I said on Question Time last night, I've been asked by the Prime Minister to pull out of the election. Yes, I do know, actually. I heard you and your husband arguing just a moment ago in the living room. Oh, said Mother, uncharacteristically lost for words. Sausages are ready, said Chloe, trying to save her mother from further humiliation. I'd better be off to work now, love, said Dad. I don't want to be late. Yes, yes, said Mother, waving him away distractedly. He discreetly picked up a couple of slices of bread and slipped them in his pocket on the way out. Chloe heard the front door loudly open and close, and then door to the room under the stairs very quietly do the same. Just 7 sausages today, please, Miss Chloe, said Mr. Stink. I don't want to put on weight. I have to think of my fan base. Fan base? Said Mother, in a barely disguised jealous rage. The telephone, which had been crouching on the table doing very little, suddenly sang its little song. Chloe picked it up. Croom residence, who is speaking, please? It's the Prime Minister. Mother's face lit up with hope, and even her bouffant seemed to perk up a bit. Ah, yes, I knew my darling Dave would change his mind. He wants to talk to Mr. Stink, actually, continued Chloe. Mother's smile turned upside down. Mr. Stink picked up the receiver with a nonchalance that suggested he often received calls from world leaders. Stink here? Yes, yes. Oh, yes. Mum and Chloe studied his face like a map, trying to read from his reactions what the Prime Minister was saying. Yes, 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 well, yes. Thank you, Prime Minister. Mr. Stink put the receiver down and sat back at the table to resume his now daily task of reading about himself in the newspapers. Well? Asked Chloe. Yes, well? Chimed in Mother. The Prime Minister has invited me to go for tea at number 10 Downing Street today, said Mr. Stink matter-of-factly. He wants me to take over from you, Mrs. Crum, as the local candidate. May I have those sausages now, please, Chloe? End of chapter 19.